Being declared dead is supposed to be the one diagnosis nobody ever comes back from. Once a doctor signs the paperwork, everything changes. The machines are switched off, the family is called, the body is covered, sealed inside a bag, and taken somewhere no living person is ever supposed to see. But every once in a while, somebody takes another breath. Sometimes the heart restarts several minutes after doctors stop CPR. Sometimes a pulse is so weak that nobody detects it. And sometimes the person is already inside a morgue or funeral home when somebody realizes the impossible mistake. To be clear, these people were not biologically dead and magically resurrected. Some were mistakenly pronounced dead. Others experienced an extremely rare medical event known as auto-resuscitation, or the Lazarus phenomenon, where circulation returns after resuscitation has ended. Either way, every person on this list crossed the line between patient and body, and somehow crossed back. Number 7. The woman who started breathing at a funeral home. On February 4, 2023, an 82-year-old woman was pronounced dead at the Water's Edge Rehab and Nursing Center in Port Jefferson, New York. Her name was never publicly released. What we do know is that the nursing home recorded her time of death as 11:15 that morning. Staff then followed the normal procedure. Her body was prepared for transport and sent to the O.B. Davis Funeral Home in Miller Place. By 1:30 in the afternoon, she had arrived at the funeral home. Nearly 3 hours had passed since she was declared dead. Then, at 2:09 p.m., funeral home workers noticed something that should have been impossible. The woman was breathing. She was immediately taken to a hospital. Authorities did not publicly explain how strong her breathing was, how she had been examined at the nursing home, or how she survived the journey. Her later condition was also kept private. But the discovery triggered investigations by both police and the New York State Department of Health. Because this was not a heartbeat returning a few seconds after CPR, this was a woman being examined, pronounced dead, transported across Long Island, and discovered alive almost 3 hours later. And somehow, this case happened only days after an almost identical mistake in another state. 6. The body bag in Iowa. In January 2023, a 66-year-old woman was receiving hospice care at Glen Oaks Alzheimer's Special Care Center in Urbandale, Iowa. She had early-onset dementia and had been declining for years. On January 3rd, staff believed she had died. A nurse examined her for roughly 5 minutes and reported that the woman had no pulse and was not breathing. Around 90 minutes later, a funeral home employee placed her inside a cloth body bag. The zipper was closed, and the woman was transported to the Ankeny Funeral Home and Crematory. When she arrived, staff saw that the bag was moving. They opened it and found the woman gasping for air. Her skin was warm. She had a pulse. An ambulance rushed her to a hospital, where doctors confirmed that she was still alive. The most disturbing detail came from the investigation. Before the woman left the care center, a staff member reportedly thought there might still be movement in her chest, but the employee assumed it was just muscle activity after death and did not alert the nurse. The woman was eventually returned to hospice and died 2 days later with her family present. Iowa regulators fined the care center $10,000. She did not recover for long, but for more than an hour, a living woman had been treated as a corpse, sealed inside a bag, and driven to a crematory. Number 5. Walter Williams. On February 26, 2014, 78-year-old Walter Williams was at his home in Lexington, Mississippi. Williams had congestive heart failure and used a pacemaker. That evening, a hospice nurse contacted the county coroner because Williams appeared to have died. The coroner and several other people checked him. They found no pulse. Williams was pronounced dead, placed inside a body bag, and transported to Porter & Sons Funeral Home. Workers moved him into the embalming room. Then the bag began to move. At first, nobody understood what they were seeing. A dead body does not kick against a zipped bag. But when workers opened it, Williams was breathing. An ambulance took him to the hospital, where he began talking to family members. The coroner later suggested that Williams' pacemaker may have temporarily stopped functioning and then restarted. That explanation was never proven, but it could explain why his heartbeat became too weak to detect before returning. William's nephew said the family was happy to have him back. Walter himself reportedly told relatives that he was glad to be alive. His recovery was temporary. A little over 2 weeks later, Williams died at the hospital. This time, the declaration was confirmed, but his case permanently changed the people who handled him. Funeral home workers who had prepared thousands of bodies had watched one wake up on their table just moments before embalming was supposed to begin. 4. Janina Kolkiewicz. In November 2014, 91-year-old Janina Kolkiewicz was living with family in the small Polish town of Ostro-Lubelski. One morning, her niece found her unresponsive. A family doctor examined Janina, found no pulse, listened for breathing, and declared her dead. Janina's body was taken to a local morgue. She was placed inside a cold storage chamber while her family began planning the funeral. 11 hours later, morgue workers noticed movement inside the body bag. When they opened it, Janina was alive. She was returned home, where one of the strangest details in any of these stories took place. According to local reports, Janina complained that she felt cold and was given hot tea and pancakes. She apparently had no understanding that she had been declared dead or that her family had already begun preparing for her burial. Doctors struggled to explain how the mistake happened. Janina was extremely elderly, and her pulse and breathing may have become so faint that they were almost impossible to detect without prolonged monitoring. Severe cold can also slow the body's processes, although the morgue itself obviously could not explain why she first appeared dead at home. The doctor who signed the death certificate said she had been certain Janina was dead. The police opened an investigation. Janina's story sounds almost comedic because of the pancakes, but remove that detail and it becomes terrifying. A conscious person woke inside a refrigerated morgue drawer because every medical check performed on her had produced the wrong answer. 3. Carlos Camejo. In 2007, 33-year-old Carlos Camejo was involved in a highway accident in Venezuela. He was taken to a hospital where doctors declared him dead. His body was transferred to a morgue so that a post-mortem examination could be performed. The pathologists began the autopsy by making an incision in Camejo's face. Then the body started bleeding far more than a dead body should. Bleeding requires circulation. The medical team quickly began trying to close the incision. Camejo regained consciousness from the pain. He later said the pain was unbearable. He woke up while medical staff was stitching his face, with no idea why he was in a morgue or why an autopsy had already started. Outside the hospital, his wife had arrived to identify his body. Instead, staff told her that her husband was alive and waiting in a corridor. Photographs taken afterward showed Camejo holding the order for his autopsy with a fresh scar across his face. Unlike many stories in this category, Camejo had not just been covered with a sheet or briefly mistaken for dead at an accident scene. Paperwork had been completed. His body had been transferred. The autopsy had begun. If his circulation had not produced visible bleeding, the pathologists might not have understood their mistake until the procedure had gone much further. Number 2. Tymesha Beauchamp. On August 23, 2020, the family of 20-year-old Tymesha Beauchamp called emergency services to their home in Southfield, Michigan. Tymesha had cerebral palsy and was struggling to breathe. Paramedics attempted resuscitation for around 30 minutes. They believed she had no signs of life and consulted an emergency room doctor by telephone. The doctor declared Tymesha dead without personally examining her. Her family did not accept it. Tymesha's mother reportedly insisted that she could still see her daughter breathing. Emergency workers returned to check, but the original conclusion remained unchanged. Tymesha was placed inside a body bag and taken to a funeral home. There, an embalmer unzipped the bag and saw her chest moving. Tymesha opened her eyes and gasped for air. She was rushed to a hospital, but the hours without proper treatment had caused catastrophic damage. Tymesha never recovered, and she died around 2 months later. Her family filed a lawsuit, arguing that the emergency response had been grossly negligent. In 2026, the city of Southfield agreed to a $3.25 million settlement while stating that no resolution could undo what happened. Officials initially suggested Tymesha may have experienced Lazarus syndrome, but her family's account raised a more disturbing possibility, that she had never stopped showing signs of life at all. The difference matters. Lazarus syndrome is a delayed return of circulation after CPR ends. A missed breath or weak pulse is not a resurrection. It is a living patient being mistaken for a dead one. Number 1. The toddler in the cold room. On February 8, 2026, an 18-month-old boy was found in a backyard swimming pool in Gilbert, Arizona. First responders performed CPR and transported him to Mercy Gilbert Medical Center. After roughly an hour, the child was pronounced dead, but police officers at the hospital believed they could still see signs of life. According to records later obtained by investigators, officers reported possible breathing or movement more than once. Despite their concerns, the toddler was taken to a cold room used as the hospital morgue. About 5 hours after he had been declared dead, hospital staff discovered that the child was breathing. He was flown to another hospital for emergency treatment, and unlike most people on this list, he survived. The hospital launched an internal review, and police investigated whether the child's parents should face negligence charges over the drowning. Prosecutors eventually declined to charge them, saying the family had installed multiple child-proof locks and that a conviction was unlikely. But the questions surrounding the hospital remained much harder to explain. How could an 18-month-old child be declared dead, show possible signs of life in front of police officers, spend hours in a room serving as a morgue, and still survive? The full medical explanation has not been released. Cold water drowning can create unusual conditions because hypothermia slows metabolism and reduces the brain's need for oxygen. In rare cases, children have survived after extraordinarily long resuscitations when their bodies became cold very quickly. That does not automatically explain this case. It only shows why declaring death after cold water drowning can be especially complicated. Medical experts are careful with the language here. People who are truly dead do not come back. What returns is circulation in somebody whose death was declared too early, or signs of life that were there all along but went unnoticed. Scientific reviews have documented dozens of Lazarus phenomenon cases. In most closely monitored examples, circulation returned within minutes after CPR stopped. One proposed explanation is that pressure builds inside the chest during ventilation, preventing blood from returning to the heart. When ventilation stops, that pressure falls. Medication already inside the body finally reaches the heart, and circulation restarts. Other cases involve hypothermia, drug effects, electrical problems in the heart, or pulses too weak to detect manually. The lesson is not that death is reversible, it is that the boundary can be much harder to measure than it looks. For the people on this list, one missed breath changed everything. A patient became a body, a hospital room became a morgue, a family began grieving someone who was still alive, and in the most extraordinary cases, the person inside the body bag was the one who proved everyone wrong. Subscribe for more disturbing true stories, explained with bad drawings and good context.